5 Oakland Unified School District schools are closing because the district says it needs to save money.
Reduce the number of campuses. That will free more funds and more resources so we can treat each remaining school better.
My name is Joel Velasquez. I'm a parent of my son here at Lakeview Elementary in Oakland, and I've been living here for 20 years in Oakland, and we are here to stand up against the cuts, the school closures, not just in Oakland, but are going across our nation here, and it's not acceptable, and it's time for parents and teachers and people to stand up and take our public education back.
So why are they closing the school?
Why are they closing this school specifically, or schools across our nation?
And another school.
Well, the main thing that every school district says across our nation is that we don't have the money. But the reality is that we do have the money.
They want to privatize.
Yeah, they want to privatize education.
And what does it mean to your children, this school being closed?
Well, for me, it's bigger than that. I think it's not just how my family is going to be affected. It's how the thousands of families are going to be affected here in Oakland. And every time we close a school, people need to realize how that affects the entire community around that school. Yeah.
So they're not doing it to help students. Why are they doing it?
There's no way that closing a school, and I know some people in the public accept that we don't have the money, but the reality, it is here. And let me give you just one example of many. They said that we don't have enough money to run this facility, so we're closing the school down. We're kicking 300 families out of Lakeview Elementary. But 2 weeks later, on July 1st, we're going to move 100 administrators into the same building. So we have money to run offices for Oakland Unified School District for administrators, but the building was intended to teach children, and we can't use it for what it was used for. Everyone's a stakeholder. Everyone that pays taxes is a stakeholder, and these buildings and these schools belong to us. It's time that we stand up and we make our local officials in our school districts put the money where it belongs, in the classroom.
And who does the board represent and the superintendent here?
The board is supposed to represent us, and the superintendent works for us and the board.
But what are they doing?
They're not listening to the citizens, the people that put them. Who they listen? Tony Smith. Tony Smith is a superintendent here in Oakland, and he actually tells our board members, don't go by school sites in your district until you're invited to come to. I've been told this by board members. That's absurd. Board members can go wherever they want to any school site in this district when they want to, not when Tony says they can. Tony needs to be fired, he needs to resign and step down. Administrators in this school district have been in their positions for too long. They're part of the problem. And if our board members are not going to step up and start listening to the public, they're going to have to be replaced also.
So who's making money from this?
Depends on who you're asking. Consultants. We spent over $80 million in 08-09 on consultants. That's absurd.
Well, where's that money going to? What do these consultants do?
I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I mean, we have consultants charging $400 to come assess something in the building when we can have a city employee do that for a tenth of the price. It's absurd. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. The money is not getting to the classroom, and that's the issue.
Leon Rebels.
You want to spell that?
R-E-V-E-L-S. Rebels.
And what do you do here?
I'm a crossing guard for the city of Oakland. I cross all of the kids, cross Grand and MacArthur, and down here too. You know, so that's why I say I've been here 14 years. So it's
why are they closing it?
Well, they say they don't have enough money.
You believe that?
No, I think it's a bunch of lies. I don't believe it. If you can put in new telephone posters, for what? All they got to do is get some paint those posters. They'll be just as good as new.
So I heard they're putting administrators in this building?
That's what they wanted. That's why they want it.
The administrators are taking over this building?
That's what I hear now. I don't know, but that's what I hear.
So they're kicking kids out
to put the administrator in here.
What does that mean to you?
That means that they want this for their own self. There's a lot more schools that they could close that's better for the kids in this school here. This is a great school. And I mean, if you'd been here yesterday, you could have seen the people coming by to see the school and had graduated from here. You know, So his,
So who does this board represent, the superintendent?
I guess they represent the city of Oakland. I don't know. I don't know. I guess the city of Oakland.
What's going to happen in these charter schools?
Well, they're probably going to charge more money or whatever. I don't know how the charter school's going to work. You know, all I know that I just hate to see this school close.
Seeing rising class sizes, closing schools. This is hurting the most vulnerable students.
This was a great school to me, and there was good staff and good people and good parents, and it's a good community.
I'm Kathleen Carroll. I'm a former attorney of a state agency here in California called the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and I'm also a whistleblower and a self-proclaimed public education advocate, an advocate for keeping public education public.
So you came down from Sacramento today to this school. What's going on here?
Yes, we're here today in Oakland, California at Lakeview Elementary School, and Lakeview Elementary School is on the chopping blocks. They're trying to convert this incredibly beautiful building into an administrative site and move all these children, these students here, and this is their last day today, June 14th, to many different school sites across the city.
Now, what's happening? Why is this taking place?
It's taking place all because of money and profits and greed, and they're trying to privatize public education as opposed to keeping public education as a public service.
And you've been doing some research on some of these board members and
yes.
People there. What have you learned?
There is numerous economic conflicts. We found lobbyists, active lobbyists who work for lobby firms that represent virtual charter schools, like the big companies like K-12 Inc., Rocket Ship Learning, literally sitting on school boards where this school board is voting on having contracts with Teach for America teachers, closing schools, firing people illegally, trying to expand charter schools. You know, it's very, very blatant to me because I've been looking at tracing the peoples and the conflicts and seeing what's happening at the sites. It's horrific.
And what's West Ed?
West Ed is a joint powers authority, and for those of you that don't know, it basically means they're a quasi-governmental agency. They used to be listed as a business entity in the Secretary of State as West Ed Corporation. They're getting numerous amounts of state and federal funding. They're getting funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They're getting money from Pearson, which is the big international testing company that's trying to align student achievement with teacher evaluations. They're getting money from school districts, so Oakland Unified, San Francisco Unified.
Why are they giving them money?
That's a good question. We went over there and didn't get very many answers, and we asked a lot of questions. It's something that we absolutely need to demand the answers to, because basically what's happening is technology is starving school budgets. There is just massive amount of crazy technology, bracelets and necklaces to track students, tons and tons of unnecessary tests instead of actual education in the classroom, lobbyists and consultants working and eating up school budgets. We have the money, but these privatizers are eating it up. If Jerry Brown has lied to the public, if there wasn't any money, then why are all these charter schools opening? Why is Pearson making a boatload of money? Why are K-12 making a boatload of money and is on the stock exchange and hedge fund managers are investing? The money is there, it's just being siphoned off, and the traditional public schools, which is over 90% of the student population, is being starved to death, and we need to stop.
And you say Jerry Brown is not telling the truth to people.
Absolutely not. He says there's a crisis. There's a crisis, all right. The money is going down the toilet. and to the privatizers. The money's there. He's acting like the money isn't there. We have to have cuts. The cut should be to the privatizers, the Pearson groups, the technology group, not to schools and to teachers and moving students all over. Low-income schools are closing, and what's going to happen to them if they can't? And they're even talking about privatizing bus transportation. So how are they going to get to school? It's going to be a complete gap between the have and have-nots.
And what's his connection with the privatizers?
Oh my God, he's got major allies with Eli Broad. He was heavily involved here in Oakland with Jack O'Connell and taking over the schools and funding his charters while schools were just, dying, literally. And we're here today, and I know a number of elementary schools are on the chopping blocks here in Oakland. I think there's about 5 of them, and we're here today at Lakeview, and it's just very, very sad.
And Brown has got a tax compromise on the ballot to help education in California. What exactly is this?
It's a scam. It's actually not easy to read, but I have read it numerous times. It's a scam. It's not about funding education. It's about funding public safety. And if people read it, they will realize that this so-called education trust account, not only is it temporary, but is part of the general fund, whereas the public safety portion of the tax initiative, which is the majority of the tax initiative, is not made part of the general fund, and there's an actual constitutional amendment that shifts that funding to local entities and giving them sole discretion, and so that's a permanent shift out of the pot of all the general funds that go to all public services, not just education but other public services, to public safety, which is his #1 campaign contributor. So that's what it's really about. And in addition to that, the temporary amount of money that may or may not get borrowed upon is going to basically give charter school operators, which have zero oversight now, sole discretion on how to spend their money. So basically, they can get money for low income or ESL students or special needs students, which they don't have very many of, but because they do a lot of picking and choosing, but when they get that money in their hands, they can spend it the way they want, as opposed to spending it on the low income children and the ESL children.
Well, some people have said that that's only temporary, that this is a temporary change in the money.
It is only temporary. So it's not about funding education. The sales tax is 4 years, the income tax increase is 7 years, so it is only temporary revenue, minuscule at that, and keep in mind it's part of the general fund, it can be borrowed upon. There's no language in there that says it cannot be borrowed upon. In fact, there's language in there that specifically says if it drops below a certain level, there is no transfer to the state superintendent of public instruction, no transfer to the districts, so there will be no money. So it can be borrowed upon.
And what permanent changes will it make in the law in California, the education code in California?
Well, in terms of the increase, they're basically, it looks like they're trying to do away with categorical funding. Categorical funding, for those of you that don't know, is restricted funding. It means when the funds get received, they have to be spent on certain programs. They can't be spent any which way they want. They can't be spent on consultants or their buddies or the language of the initiative says no administrators, but they can get around that and pay consultants and say consultants are not considered administrators. But categorical funding, when they receive it, is supposed to be spent on specific programs like low-income programs, English language learners programs, special need programs. If you do away with that, where is the money going to go? There's no guarantee it's going to be going where it should be.
Well, they're saying that the boards of these charters will be in charge of where the money goes.
Well, we see what the boards are doing. Here we are. What is Oakland Unified doing? What is Tony Smith doing? He's closing schools. He's not closing charters. A lot of money's going to technology. A lot of money's going to testing. this is what's happening with these school boards. These school boards are made up of privatizers. If they're not Broad alums, they're coming out of University of San Diego. They're basically business people. These people have connections with the privatizers. They are privatizers, and they expect to make a profit.
Now, the University of Phoenix, are you saying that this money that's being raised by the tax could go to private online charters or the University of Phoenix operations?
Yes. Our tax dollars do go to them. I mean, you look around and see how, I don't know if people remember, approximately 10 years ago maybe, you would see an occasional national university or an occasional University of Phoenix. I think there was difficulty actually of University of Phoenix moving here in the first place, but it'd be in an old rundown kind of warehouse off of a freeway somewhere. Now they've got glass tower buildings, very, very fancy. I mean, we're funding that.
And you're saying the money in this ballot initiative could go to those kind of operations?
Yes. There's, well, now we're switching from K-12 to higher education. Within, there's Laura Wells. Within higher education, the CSU in particular, the Cal State universities, in which I believe there's 23 campuses, they have what's called the Institute for Education Reform. That was started by former Senator Gary K. Hart. Gary Hart and Susan Burr in 1992, Susan Burr is now Jerry Brown's education advisor, they literally wrote the charter school laws. They started these Institute for Education reforms literally in our public higher education institutions. And those public higher education institutions was supposed to be a low-cost college opportunity for California residents. Our community colleges, our CSUs, and our UCs are being privatized. More and more and more is being sold off and contracted and partnered, if you will, with businesses so they can make money. They're being given government contracts. And there's numerous conflicts. I couldn't go into it in a short amount of time.
What are some of the criminal conflicts that exist?
Oh my God. Well, at the commission,
Sheila Jordan?
Sheila Jordan is the superintendent of Alameda County Office of Ed. But at the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, one person, the former chair of the commission, Ting Lan Sung, she had so many conflicts it makes my head spin, and she did not disclose them all on her Fair Political Practices Economic Interest 700 form, which is required by law for any government decision maker. And the reason it's required is because when a governor appoints someone like that, the Senate then has a year to confirm or not confirm a person. They're supposed to vet these people and make sure they don't have economic conflicts. Why? So their decisions aren't tainted. Their decisions are supposed to be unbiased and be for the public good, the public at large. Not their decisions shouldn't be made to line their own pockets. And those decisions, she's...
Well, Darrell Steinberg, wasn't he part of approving her?
Yes, absolutely. The Senate confirmed her.
Was there any opposition raising these conflicts of interest?
Not that I'm aware of. Not until I was opposing it. There may have been, but I certainly am not aware of anyone opposing her. And if they did, it wasn't successful. She was confirmed by the Senate.
And you were fired as a whistleblower at the CTC. Why were you fired?
Well, CTC would say for insubordination and dishonesty and a whole host of things, but I was fired during the middle of an audit that I initiated with the state auditor's office.
And what did that audit show?
The audit showed a number of things. There was unlawful delegation of authority by the attorneys. The attorneys were making arbitrary decisions on their own without it having go in violation of the Administrative Procedures Act, without it going through the decision makers as required by statute. They were not giving teachers due process. They were asking questions outside the scope of what the Ed Code allows them to investigate. They're not vigilantes. They can't go out and say, we don't like the way that person walks, so let's haul that teacher in. Oh, that person's holding a protest sign, let's haul that teacher in. No. They have an Ed Code, which is 44242.5. It gives them a window of things that they can open a case on and what they can investigate. And there has to be a nexus to fitness to teach. and they were asking questions way outside of that and outside of a relationship to fitness to teach. And there's these Morrison factors. Morrison is a California Supreme Court case, Morrison versus State Board of Ed, 1969 decision. It's still the law of the land. And basically, in order to take a licensing action, now I'm not talking about discipline at a school district, and that's a personnel matter, but I'm talking about a licensing action on a teacher. Morrison is the law, and they were not following it.
And do the unions, the CTA and the CFT, know about this?
They should. Yes, they do know. They do. They've seen the
CFT and the CTA know about what the malfeasance.
Absolutely, absolutely. The credential applications, they've seen those. There's questions. There's two questions in particular that ask things that are outside of jurisdiction of what they're able to look at. They violated Hewitt numerous times, which was a court order and decision that happened that basically is where CTC failed and went outside. They absolutely know. I mean, the audit report is public. I mean,
what is the CTA and CFT doing to educate their members and fight back about these attacks?
Well, what's shocking to me is, I used to think that CTA, were kind of, trying their hardest to fight them, and they were kind of, the good people, and they had no idea what CTC was, up to or what they were doing. Now I've talked to numerous teachers and found out that, their attorneys that have thrown cases, that have not argued things, that haven't returned
cases.
Literally, at first I didn't believe it, but then after numerous calls, similar law firms being talked about. I mean, just story after story. Yes. Yeah, it's also I mean, they could have civil cases. They could have a bar offense. I mean, there's just a lot of dirty stuff going on, and it appears that CTA is taking money from the Gates Foundation and the Packard Foundation, and they have one thing in mind, and that's to expand technology and public education and make money and bust up unions because it resists that private, atmosphere, the entrepreneurial atmosphere, and they want merit pay, they want to reduce healthcare benefits. They basically want all teachers to be eventually probably independent contractors, just like working for a company.
And who in CTA and the CFT is responsible for this?
Well, certainly, the higher up, certainly the general counsel should be held responsible. It used to be Beverly Tucker. The new person, I think her name is Alice O'Brien. I think I looked her up. She's also the general counsel for NEA, and it looked like she either had inactive status or not inactive status with the California State Bar, and I don't know what the reason is for that. But they contract out most of the teacher discipline cases to private law firms.
Is this why there's no campaign really against going after the criminal conflicts of the privatizers in California?
Well, it looks like potentially they're getting kickbacks from the Gates Foundation and the Packard Foundation, and there may be others. They literally have formed a nonprofit arm of the CTA, and of course they probably weren't always receiving Gates money because the Gates Foundation didn't exist when the foundation initially started in the late 60s, but they've rechanged their name, and we went to the Secretary of State office and looked at the new officers and the new board member, and they're receiving money from both Gates and Packard Foundation.
And this whole problem, I mean, teachers are calling you in terror and just...
Yeah, I mean, it's unreal. I'm getting emails, I'm getting contacted by other people to contact me. One person actually left a note at my house. I mean, people's lives are being ruined. It's horrific.
And so the CTA knows about this?
CTA, I believe, have caused some of their members severe harm.
By how?
Some of these law firms are, I need to distinguish, some of the law firms contract with CTA. They're private law firms, and they basically get a certain amount of money, $3,000 to $5,000 to represent a teacher for a licensing hearing. They get another $5,000 to $7,000 if they want to take it up on appeal, but I've seen the cases being thrown. I've seen the arguments haven't been made. I mean, I'm an attorney. private information is being going up on the internet. One poor woman, they tried to compel a psyche valve on her. They said she was mentally ill, put it up on the internet, which is totally outrageous because
I'm going to principal the school, and I just want people.
So you're here in front of the school.
Actually in the playground area in the back of the school.
And these are the kids that are going to be affected by this.
Yeah, it's very sad.
So you're saying that it shouldn't be closed, that they can afford the school, but there are other interests that are interested in closing
Yeah, no, the money's there. They're just giving it to their campaign coffer interests. That's what they're doing.
In Sacramento, what's going on with the Sacramento education situation?
Oh, it's happening across the country, but I live in Sacramento. It's happening everywhere. I mean, Twin Rivers Unified, numerous issues of allegations of corruption and self-dealing contracts and embezzling money, and a whole bunch of things are coming out of that district. Natomas Unified, we're actually authorized the Natomas Charter School, where the former chair of the commission actually is a founder, and she didn't disclose that on her conflict form, as well as her spouse's income. That has a lobbyist that used to work for school, I think she still works for School Innovations and Advocacy, which represents K-12 Inc. and Rocket Ship Learning. They're contracting with TFA, Teach for America. I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
Teach for America?
Pardon me?
What is the role of Teach for America?
What is?
What is the role of Teach for America?
Teach for America basically is a quickie way to get teachers without going through a lengthy quality teacher preparation program. They basically get people out of college, whatever it is, 6 months, like a boot camp type thing, and boom, in the classroom. It's ridiculous.
So they're getting rid of real.
They just want to. It's just a union busting. They're trying to basically deprofessionalize teaching and basically say anyone can teach. If someone with 6 months training is just as good as someone with 5 years training, which is absurd. And there's numerous studies, and Diane Ravitch, who's an education scholar in New York, she's written about this. It's absolutely absurd.
Now, this school is in the Oakland School District.
Yes.
You have Congressman Barbara Lee, who's a congressman. What is the role of these congresspeople in the districts where they have these schools that are being closed down?
They seem to be all aligned with corporations. Basically, money and politics go hand in hand. These politicians are aligning themselves with the privatizers, even though over 90% of the student population goes to traditional public schools. All the money is being siphoned off to technology companies, which is lining the pockets of our politicians, to Pearson, which is testing these poor kids ad nauseum and not adding any value in the process, and they're taking away from classroom instruction. So technology, testing, lobbyists, consultants are literally eating the school budgets alive. Take that away, take all that unnecessary crap away, we can keep this open and keep other schools open. We could have programs that teach quality teacher preparation programs, and this wouldn't be happening. But the politicians don't want that, because their money is what talks to them, not the people.
And what kind of money are these politicians getting?
A lot of money. I mean, Ed Voice, which is a political action committee, is one of the top 5 campaign contributors in the state. Walton Foundation gives to them.
Isn't Ed Voice being funded by school districts, by public bodies?
Ed Voice is has layers of funding. I mean, you try to trace the money through Ed Voice, it would be a challenge. In fact, the Fair Political Practices Committee actually was investigating them in the 2010 general election, because they literally were almost abusing the independent expenditures, and there was literally no transparency. You had to go layer upon layer, and all these funny nonprofits were giving money. Then you had to go to the nonprofits to see who were behind the nonprofits. I mean, just so many layers. The average person would have no way of really digging and finding out who was behind all this money. But there's a lot of people behind it.
And Michelle Rhee, what is the role of Michelle Rhee?
Oh my God, she is she comes out.
Michelle Rhee?
Okay, Michelle Rhee is the former DC chancellor of the failed DC public school system. She got kicked out after Mayor, what is his name, Adrian Fenty got kicked out. She's now in Sacramento. She's the First Lady of Sacramento. She's married to our Mayor, Kevin Johnson. She has started Student First. Student First is nationwide, people should understand. There's a Student First in New York, there's Student First in California, there's Student First across the country. It's being funded by Gates and Broad, and she's going around the country getting a lot of money. She uses change.org to scam people into joining, to look like she has a lot of people in Students First, so the politicians back her, because the politicians may think that she has a lot of people behind her when she really doesn't, and she's just a real scam artist.
And what does she do in California?
Right now she's basically boosting Student First and the Teach for America. There's just, they basically is these quickie teacher prep programs, expanding charter schools. They're just expanding charter schools everywhere. They talk about the virtual schools too, the online schools, but the charter schools is a big thing for them.
And how is she trying to infiltrate school boards and superintendents?
Well, basically, the Broad she's on the board of the Broad Academy. So, and the Broad Academy literally trains these superintendents. Randolph Ward, who used to be the superintendent here in Oakland, is a Broad alum, and I believe he graduated in 2003. And we all know what he did to Oakland schools.
What did he do to Oakland schools?
He basically just tried to financially destroy them. That's what they're doing. This is purposeful defunding, because if there's purposeful defunding and there's not enough money for things, guess what? Jerry Brown gets to stand on his podium and says there's a crisis. Well, there is a crisis, but they're creating it purposefully by defunding the public schools.
So are you saying Jerry Brown is aware of the destruction of public education?
Absolutely. He was part of it when he was mayor of Oakland. Yes. I mean, there were literally schools that Oakland Unified had to be taken over by the state, for crying out loud. They're totally in fiscal disaster, and yet his two charter schools were flourishing. He was all happy about giving, plenty of money for them. He couldn't care if the kids in poor neighborhoods of Oakland were doing without their programs or getting an education. All he cares about is lining his pocket.
And his wife?
She used to be Ann Guest. She used to be the general counsel for GAP. So, and GAP Foundation is, and Fishers are part of the KIP charter schools. And that's a very large charter school. And again, they have charter schools not just in California, across the country.
And the Gulen, what is Gulen for all this?
Really? Gulen it's very scary, some of the things that I'm reading about, and people I'm talking to, like Sharon Higgins, who's done a lot of research on this. Magnolia Public Schools is the largest charter school chain linked to Gulen here in California, and they have charter schools throughout Southern California all the way up to Northern California.
And what are they doing? How do they operate these charter schools?
From what I understand, and this is not first-hand information, this is information that I received from Sharon Higgins and others, they're teaching them a lot about the Turkish culture, and apparently the American Turkish Council has their hand in the FBI, the CIA, the U.S. Congress. I mean, it's a little scary to think that our tax dollars are going to something that sounds like it should be a completely private school. I mean, certainly there's no problem with having an Islamic school, a Turkish school, Hebrew school, or whatever you want, but tax dollars and public funds, if they want to have a private school, let them have a private school. There's no problem with that, but our tax dollars should not be funding that.
And they're being investigated by school boards because of using bond money and other public money improperly.
From what I understand, there are some corruption allegations that are happening out of the Fulton schools, which are also Gulen schools. They go by numerous names, so no one would know they're a Gulen school unless they trace all the connections and see that. Well, there's a lot of misrepresentation. There's a lot of lack of transparency is what's going on. But apparently in Texas, I believe, there's numerous allegations allegations of paycheck scandals and self-dealing and other kind of, corruption issues. You'd have to ask Sharon more about it because she's been doing more of the research.
Now, Pearson Company, who are they? Who is Pearson?
Pearson is headquartered in the United Kingdom, in England. The Chief Education Advisor is Sir Michael Barber. Sir Michael Barber is a big wig. He used to be the Senior Advisor to Prime Minister of England, Tony Blair, from 1997 to 2005. He's their Chief Education Advisor. And their CEO is Marjorie Scardino. She's also located in England, in London.
And what do they do?
They are just making a boatload of money. They consider this a cash cow time because all this testing, they're loving it. They don't care the kids aren't learning, that teachers are not being able to teach. They care that all these tests, whether it be to evaluate teachers or assessments galore or field tests, they don't care that it's hurting education. They are making tons and tons of money. They're an international company.
And what connections do they have with the CTC and government school boards?
They get government contracts. In fact, they're being investigated by the New York Attorney General's office for kickbacks to governmental officials. They have a nonprofit arm, and that nonprofit arm was apparently giving kickbacks in the form of worldwide vacations to governmental officials so NCS Pearson can get government contracts.
And why isn't this being investigated in California?
It's a very good question. It's not to my knowledge. I don't know if anyone's looking into it, but they certainly should.
Has been notified about this?
She's been notified.
No response.
Not that I'm aware of. But NCS Pearson was involved in the design of the Common Core standards with a contract through a company called Achieve. There's 4 state governors on that board, acting, sitting governors, as well as the Stanford University, and that's who designed the Common Core standards, which if you ask teachers about those, are a disaster.
So you're saying there's a web of connections?
There is.
Privatizers, private operators, profiteers,
yes, absolutely.
Education superintendents.
The retired CEO of Intel, Craig Barrett, sits on the board. He's actually the chairman of the board of K-12 Inc. He also happens to be on the board of Achieve Inc., which is the company I just mentioned that contracts with Pearson, that through Stanford and Pearson, funded by Lumina, State Farm, and the Gates Foundation and Alliance for Education Excellence, designed the Common Core standards.
And Lumina Foundation, who are they?
They're a contributor to ALEC, which you may or may not have heard about, which is a right-wing think tank, and they've got their hands all over this. They're funded by all the big corporations. There's just too much list to tell you now, but all the major corporations, AT&T, Walton.
And Udoff?
Mark Udoff, who's the president of the University of California, sits on the board of the Lumina Foundation.
Has he been questioned about these possible conflicts?
It's a total conflict, and he should be questioned.
Why is it a total conflict?
Because the UC system is a public university. The UC, CSU, and community college system, as I mentioned before, are public institutions of higher education. They were put in place so California residents could have a quality, reasonable, affordable, accessible higher education, as opposed to if they couldn't afford to move back east, for example, or they couldn't afford or couldn't qualify to go to Princeton, Yale, or Stanford, or to a private college. That's what the intent was. So it's a private institution. The president of the UC should not be sitting on a board that their main goal is to privatize the education system.
Why do you say Lumina's main goal is to privatize education?
They basically have their hands in all these, they're connected with all the privatizers. Their whole goal, they are a contributor of ALEC, and ALEC is involved in union busting, privatizing everything.
Why is our SAIU official or other officials involved with Lumina and some of these other boards? Why are these union officials involved in this?
I believe that and I want to make careful that I say this, there are some very good union people, and collective bargaining is a right, not a privilege. But there are some union officials that are on the take, and I don't know that all the union members are aware of it.
And what should these union members do about this?
They should be outraged, because there is not a fight here, and there should be a fight. CTA has a lot of money, and they are one of the very strongest unions here in our state, and they are not putting up a fight.
Well, they're supporting this ballot initiative, Jerry Brown's ballot initiative, which you say is going to fund more charter schools in California.
Well, it's going to give them discretionary ways to, it may give them more money. See, the decision to close down a school and start a charter starts kind of at the school board level now without his tax initiative. So what they're doing, Education Alliance, Ed Voice, are basically putting tons of money in these local races. So basically the deck is stacked, and they have all these pro-privatizers, pro-charter advocates on the school boards, on the city councils, in the local races. So basically, these people don't have a chance to keep their schools open. I mean, they just don't. Not with school boards that are willing to union bust, willing to hurt teachers, willing to close down schools at the drop of a bucket in order to make money. I don't know how they sleep at night, but I guess greed is not, it's just an immoral, issue.
And you were at some school meetings in Sacramento at schools that were being closed. What happened at some of those schools?
Oh, it's heartbreaking. One happened at the Sacramento County Office of Ed. Money was being given to Margaret Fortune, who doesn't even have a teaching credential, to start a chain of 5 charter schools in Sacramento County, when 2 schools now are literally hurting, Natomas Unified and Elk Grove Unified. But I mean, again, they're stacking the deck with these boards. The County Office of Ed board members, the school board members, they're all stacked. In fact, Margaret Fortune happens to be a CSU trustee. She was appointed by Arnold Schwarzenegger. So she should not, that's another conflict.
Has Jerry Brown appointed any labor people to the board of trustees?
Not that I'm aware of.
But
they're all business people, pro-privatizers. Yeah. There's no rank and file teachers. I mean, and I saw that at the commission. Statutorily, the commission is required to have a secondary and elementary sit on the commission and sit on the committee of credential. But these individuals, even the public members, were all pro-business people. They had their hands, essentially, either the teachers that were there had their hands basically in an administrative path. They weren't rank and file teachers.
Now, this tax initiative, what language does it change that is going to continue as far as education is concerned after the initiative, if it passes?
It's a scam. I mean, if people read what happened, what Jerry Brown did to the Oakland schools during his tenure as mayor, they will realize that he is an ally of Eli Broad and vice versa, and they should just not vote for it. Jerry Brown is lying to the public, plain and simple. The money is there, it's just being siphoned in the wrong places. Technology companies are getting tons of money. Virtual schools are getting tons of money. Testing companies are getting tons of money. Consultants are getting tons of money. People may not realize, but school districts are giving money to lobby firms.
Why is that wrong? Why is it happening?
And there's a conflict between the clients, which are traditional. I don't know why it's happening. I was actually shocked when I found out. Because basically these lobby firms have traditional public schools and private, privatization companies at the same time. And all the money is basically being siphoned to them, not to traditional public schools. And so, all you have to do is open your eyes and see how many schools are closing.
Is that an issue, political issue by the CTA and California Federation of Teachers?
What do you mean?
Are they raising it? Are they publicizing to their members about this?
I mean, it should be a political issue, but the fight, it doesn't appear.
Have you heard from the CFT and the CTA about concerns about this and raising this as a public issue in California?
I haven't heard from them personally. On their website, they have this little blip about privatization. Oddly enough, charter schools is not listed or even defined in that little segment on privatization. You have to go to another link where they talk about charter schools as if those are not part of the problem.
So are they trying to cover it up with privatization?
I don't know what kind of deal they have with Gates and Packard Foundation and other money that they're getting, but they're essentially getting kickbacks. They're getting money from these foundations, and so they're probably getting more money from them than they are from dues. So, I mean, they're just going where the money flows. And the money is flowing like a spigot with Gates, and it's just dribbling with the members, and so, you know, it's obvious what they're doing. I mean, it's sad to me because, you know, it's completely illegal.
There was no need to close the 5 schools, in my opinion. They have the money. It's just their priorities.
I'm Jack Gerson. I'm with the Occupy Oakland Education Committee. I'm formerly a teacher in Oakland with the Oakland Education Association. And I've been involved with the Education Committee with Occupy Oakland since October when it formed. And it's parents and teachers, some of whom come from this committee, who have organized this. Parents from Lakeview and others of the 5 closed schools. OUSD is closing down 5 elementary schools for no reason really, except to privatize, except to downsize education, to continue with a campaign that's going on nationally. Philadelphia is closing 40 public schools this year. They're going to be 40% charter schools in 5 years. They're closing down 6 more every year at least, they've announced, for the next 5 years. Kansas City closed half of its public schools 2 years ago, 30 of the 61 schools. What have they done with them? Well, those that aren't just lying empty were either turned over to developers or to charter school organizations. 10 years ago, before the state of California took over the schools in Oakland, Oakland had 54,000 students, only 2,000 of whom were in charter schools. Now it has 36,000 students with 8,000 in charter schools. You can see them downsizing and privatizing because charter schools get public money, but they're not controlled by the public. So they're like backdoor vouchers. They're
so where's the CTA and the OEA on this?
Well, I haven't been tracking OEA too closely. I know that they're opposed to charter schools. I hope that there's more fight in the dog than we've seen so far this year from them.
Have they had an education camp against privatization?
Do they have an education camp?
Against privatization in education in Oakland? Have they held any conferences against privatization and charters in Oakland?
They held a conference 4.5 years ago. I know they did because I organized it.
So they haven't had any education conferences since.
That was, I believe, the last conference. That was, I believe, in December of 2007 at Laney College, and I was one of the 4 organizers of that conference.
What about the CTA? I understand they're supporting charters and have a charter division of the CTA.
Yes, CTA has a charter division. CTA's position has been that if you can't beat them, join them. They're just too strong a trend. Rather than fight and take it on directly, they've been accommodating to it. So they do have a charter school division. Furthermore, they have an approach which says, let's see if we can get parity to try to get the same wages and benefits for teachers. But you know what happens when you do that? They weaken the union, and then they drive down the union benefits and wages, and then they'll drive down the charter schools because they're just parity, and it's ratcheting down, a race to the bottom. This is a losing strategy. And then the parent organization, NEA, is worse. CTA is viewed as the left wing of NEA, despite CTA's craving accommodation and complicity with management. CTA believes in collaborating, but not as much as NEA does. NEA is now going gung-ho for Obama, saying that Obama's the education president, he's our only hope. What has Obama done? Obama has all along been for charter schools. He's been for more testing. He says smarter testing, but Obama thinks he's smarter than everybody about everything. Arnie Duncan, who we put in charge of schools, the Secretary of Education, was the chief executive officer of Chicago schools when Obama plucked him for his Secretary of Education post. He shut down dozens of schools and imposed high-stakes testing, bashed teachers, shut down schools, and fired the teachers. When they closed a school in Chicago, or even kept it open but just reorganized it, teachers were left without a job. And now Rahm Emanuel, the former chief of staff of the White House, is the mayor, and Rahm Emanuel is taking the program of privatization and charterization and attacking the unions that Duncan engineered, and he's taking it to new levels of depths. So that's what we can expect from Obama.
Well, why hasn't the NEA been so supportive of Charter's leadership, and why hasn't that been challenged directly by calling for the resignation of these leaders?
I think that NEA is following the same strategy, and AFT, even if anything worse, the same strategy that was followed by the private sector unions, with team concept, quality circles, that we will work together with management, that we have to share sacrifices, that we will take responsibility for disciplining the workers because we're not strong enough to take them head on, is their excuse. Where did that lead in the private sector? It led to the destruction of the UAW, the steel workers, and the other great union. It's led to the fact where they're about 6% of the workforce now. Same thing is happening in the public sector unions, and they're following the same strategy, and it's a train wreck, and we all have seen this train, the previous train hit the wall, and they're going even faster this time. We have to turn this around. No collaboration, no privatization, no accommodation with charter schools, and we also have to demand fully funded public education. They threw trillions of dollars. Every month you see a new figure coming out about how many trillions were given to the banks, and now they're gearing up for another round of recapitalizing the banks because of the crisis in Europe. They're getting ready to say, sorry, no money. Well, if the banks really have no money, what should we do with them? We should take them over and bail out schools and vital public services and fund human needs.
Now, this tax initiative, the compromised Jerry Brown tax initiative, is supposed to help education. What do you think of this?
Well, I think that I don't know how far we can throw Jerry Brown, but we shouldn't trust him 1/10 of the distance we can throw him, because Jerry Brown not only was an advocate for charter schools, he remains an advocate for charter schools. He has 2 charter schools in Oakland, the Oakland School of the Arts and the Oakland Military Institute, that he raises millions of dollars a year for. Jerry Brown was mayor in Oakland during the state takeover. In fact, he invited the state in. He asked Eli Broad, he and Jack O'Connor, who was then the state superintendent of education, invited Los Angeles billionaire Eli Broad to name the state administrator during the state takeover. Jerry Brown sat back and watched all this happen and didn't intervene because he was for it. During Jerry Brown's term as mayor, charter schools enrollment quadrupled. The debt was tripled under the state takeover during the Brown administration, from $37 million to $110 million. Now the state demands that we pay it back, although they ran it up. And who is in charge of the state? Jerry Brown. They should be excusing the debt, and OUSD should repudiate it.
Well, what about this tax initiative?
Well, the tax initiative, this compromise that was made, well, why are they First of all, we know that Brown, the whole idea of 2 ideas in getting the millionaires tax drop. One is that the millionaires tax did not include any regressive taxation. It didn't tax all the rich as much as it should, but at least it only went after the rich. Brown's compromise has that 0.25% sales tax in there for a reason. It's a statement of intent to soak the poor. It's saying we are going to have regressive taxation. And there's another reason, because Brown explicitly ties his compromise proposal to his budget, to his harmful budget, which involves cuts not only in education but in other vital services. We need to say no to this. And what this is a typical Brown stampede. He plays 2 cards. One of them says the Republican card. This will be harsh, terrible austerity, help, help. And the other one is my card. So therefore we need austerity, but maybe not quite as bad as them, and there's no other option. He hides the other 50 cards.
Didn't the CFT and the CTA help him?
CTA was in his camp from the beginning, and CFT was supporting the millionaire's tax, but then, in an opaque way, in a non-transparent way, ditched the campaign and went over to Brown's compromise tax without first, for example, going to Occupy Education and saying, we need your support. We need all of you to go out and organize and help fundraise and carry out this campaign for what we know is a much better alternative. They didn't do that.
That goes to the school. What's your name?
Muazu.
So what do you think about the school closing?
I don't really like it because I love the school.
Yeah, it's nice. We live across the street right over here, and now we've got to travel all the way to the other end of town by the border of San Leandro. And I just came from that school just now. It's a nice school, but it's a great distance away. We've got to go on the freeway. We live right across the street right here. So this is a major inconvenience for us. And you know, the after-school program is going to step in and help with the transportation. So you know, that's the only reason why I've stuck with this whole thing. But I think this is going to fall apart because we're going to lose a lot of students along the way. They've asked a lot of students to commit to go to that school, but I think the parents are giving up steam, and you're going to end up with it's going to disperse the students in all directions. It's a miserable plan. I think it's a bad plan. The money's there. It's ridiculous that they're closing a really nice school. A lot of the kids live right here. Now we've got to go to the far corners of the earth to get to school. This is really ridiculous. It defeats the purpose of education. Yeah, who is this benefiting? That is the good question. We need to examine this because it's definitely not benefiting the students or the parents. It's causing a major inconvenience in transportation, travel, cost, time, everything. It's caused a major inconvenience to every parent and every child. So this is a failure. It's ridiculous. It's hopeless.
Well, who does the board represent? I heard they're going to put administrators in the school.
Whatever is going to be representing the school is going to be watched very closely, and it's going to be disrupted at every level because people are sick and tired of this. They're not going to let this stand. So maybe the school is going to learn the hard way. The people are not going to let this stand. They might have succeeded in the first 2 rounds, but as you see, they're going to fight this every step of the way. The parents are disappointed. It's caused a major inconvenience to every parent in the school. Now, some of us can cope with this, but others won't, and it's going to affect the student ratio in the other schools, and it's going to affect the teachers and the funding. So this is a hopeless situation all around, and it's going to backfire. I think this is a bad idea, and they need to, I don't know whether they can reconsider it, but it's a hopeless idea. It's a miserable situation of the school district. It's an embarrassment. It's a shame. It is a real shame, you know. I mean, we're considering moving our kids to Berkeley and other places. I mean, this is ridiculous. We have good schooling in Oakland, but here they're taking a good school from a good neighborhood and taking us to the worst neighborhood in town.
They're trying to destroy public education.
I don't know whether this is gentrification, but this is highly suspicious, and we're going to examine it from every angle. From a legal angle, from a political angle, from a racial angle, from an economic angle, and we're going to, not me, but the parents, the student body, the community, and the people. The people are going to speak. So ultimately, the school is for the people, and if the people are not happy, they're going to vote, they're going to speak, they're going to protest, and they're going to disrupt, whatever it takes. So, you know, I'm just expressing what's happening and what will happen. I'm just a parent. I'm coping with the situation. I'm moving to a terrible neighborhood at the other end of Oakland when I live in a good neighborhood right across the street here. Okay?
Maybe that's why they want the school.
So I think this is a sad case of gentrification of the school. As I said, there's going to be lawsuits and things are going to be hitting this really hard on every angle. We're going to examine it from a racial standpoint, from an economic standpoint, from a legal standpoint, from an educational standpoint, and a conscious standpoint. This is a really conscious town, and we're not going to let this sit. In the long run, this is a failure, and the school district has lost and will continue to lose.